Welcome back, everyone. I'm so excited to have with me today Joey Kinney and Hannah Hood from Summit Virtual CFO. And they run their own podcasting show, the Young CPA Success Show, which is one of my favorite podcasts. So I'm so excited to have Joey and Hannah here today.
I think
Joey and
Joe is a good merger of our names.
We need to come up with our Hollywood name. Is it Jana? Is that what we're gonna be?
Joa?
Joa works. Either one's fine with me. I like it.
There we go. Yeah.
I love it. Do you guys want to give a brief introduction? Most of my audience is accounting students, so maybe focus on the beginning of your careers and the college part of your careers. And the main thing I always like to ask my guests is, why did you choose accounting? Because as we were just talking about before the episode, it's hard to get young people into the accounting industry right now. And so it's always interesting to know why you chose accounting.
Mm-hmm.
Hannah, you go for it. You've got a better story than I do.
No, my path to where I am right now was probably the most unconventional, and just kind of all the twists and turns that life could potentially bring me where I am right now. I would have never foreseen whenever I graduated high school, but I can appreciate them for what they've taught me. Whenever I was in high school, one of my first jobs was working at a payday cash advance and title loan company that my grandmother was the manager for. And I started working there before I was legally able to work there. She would pay me cash to come in and just file paperwork and spend time with her, really, is ultimately what I look back on and see from that experience. But whenever I was able of age to legally work, they hired me on, and she taught me very early on how to do their reports, how to do the reconciliations, all of these just really foundational accounting things that I fell in love with at the time. So for me, I was like, okay, well, accounting makes sense for me to go into. But I got to college and I was like, I don't know, maybe this isn't for me. So I actually changed my major at one point. I knew that I was good at math, so I changed my major to mathematics, and I was like, I could do math education with that. I could maybe teach at a college if I wanted to go that route. And then I met my husband and we got married. We've been married for 14 years. And so he's about 7 years older than I am. So he was at a different point in his career. So, we were really focused on his career at the time. So I put mine on the back burner. I put college on the back burner for a while to have my kids and raise my kids. All the while I still held positions within the accounting industry, starting out as bookkeeper. I worked my way all the way up to controller before I ever even completed my degree as an adult, just because I had just really proved my worth realistically at the time. But then I realized that that's all it was ever going to be for me if I didn't take it to the next level. And in between there, I also decided that I wanted a break from accounting, and I did insurance for a while. I am a licensed insurance agent, and I quickly became junior partner of our agency. When I was there, I took on our forecasting, budgeting, reconciliation processes, and I was like, this is my passion. This is really where I want to live, and I really want to dedicate more of my career to that. And throughout that process is really what led me to Summit. And this was also post-COVID. So I learned through COVID that we could do our jobs without having to physically be in an office. It just really opened my eyes to remote work and the possibilities for me in that, especially being a mom of 3 kids, and a husband who's a teacher and a coach of 2 sports. So I needed to be present for my family, but I also probably maybe selfishly wanted to focus on my career and be really good at what I did. And so Summit has provided that for me, and I am eternally grateful for that, because I get to now be a podcast co-host. What in the world? I never would have imagined. So it's just been a really cool journey to get here.
Well, I'll take the different side of this equation because Hannah and I, it's really funny too. You mentioned the remote part, Hannah. We've known each other for what, over 2 years or almost 2 years at this point.
Yeah.
How many times have we met in real life? Is it like
Like
three?
3. Yeah.
3 or 4? Like
Yeah.
that's the weird thing about, and it's the weird thing, but also the special thing about what we do and where we work is that we have so many people that we've just known forever. And it's like you go and you meet them in real life for the first time. You're like, oh, okay, this just feels normal. Whereas, that was the thing I think I was weirded out the most about in terms of joining the remote firm. But your question was about our background. So let me talk to that before I sidebar something completely different. I came from a family of accountants. My parents were both accountants. My dad, oddly enough, quit the accounting industry to run the family insurance business. So Hannah and I have always had that in common, which has been fun. My mom was a working CPA for a number of years, most of my childhood. She retired, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, to be grandma and do all the things that she wants to do with her life, which is fantastic. But I got the itch, and the knowledge was transferred to me very early. I think I started doing bookkeeping when I was a teenager. So then I went to college at the University of New Mexico for 2 years, and I was a history and accounting business double major. And 2008 happened. And I switched schools, went to Kansas State, and was trying to figure out, hey, things are looking a little goofy in the economy, right? Like, is there going to be a lot of jobs for history majors? I don't know about that. So I took an accounting class, and everything just kind of clicked into place. I was like, oh, the things that my parents were teaching me all those years ago about reconciliations and stuff, I knew what they were. I didn't really know the mechanics behind it, and it just sort of made sense. So I was like, well, I could go back to trying to be an engineer or trying to be whatever I was doing before. I took engineering physics as a freshman, and I was like, I just don't think this way. So having a class where it's like, I really do think this way was really helpful. And then, everything just kind of rolled through from there, and just kind of leaned into the accounting thing, and met a lot of different people who came into accounting for a lot of different reasons. I think historically, the reason people have always chosen or gravitated towards accounting is it's perceived as stable, and it's perceived as, kind of for lack of a better term, a safe option to go into. Some of that's still true. Some of that's going to change, and that's okay. That's the nature of life and the nature of everything that we do. And our focus, our job, our passion is kind of trying to help people like you and your friends figure out what it is they want to do in their future and how you go from where you are now as a student to where you're going to be. I'm trying to make my hands fit in the camera frame here. I'm a little closer on this one than I am in mine, and I talk with my hands a lot, but that's sort of the long answer for how I became an accountant. I kind of had this family thing, and then it realized it just kind of made sense.
I love that. So something I want to ask right now that I wasn't planning on asking. I see a lot of posts on LinkedIn about early accountants doing bookkeeping early on and the difference that can make in understanding how accounting works. Since both of you had bookkeeping and reconciliation experience early on, do you feel like that's impacted your ability to understand accounting principles and be a good accountant, even after you've kind of graduated and moved on to, audit and tax and things that are quite a bit more complicated than just closing the books?
Unequivocally, yes, is my answer in that, because I will say, even if you don't have that foundation, like going into college, you will find that foundation will come through real work experience more than any class could ever teach you. Like, I'm a big fan of the AICPA and NASBA considering work experience in replace of the 30 extra credit hours, because I feel so strongly that I think maybe even my journey is a little bit of a testament to that, in terms of the fact that, like, I worked my way up all the way to controller before I ever completed my degree. So, like, clearly I had foundational experience in accounting principles through real life work experience. So absolutely.
Chayton, I'm so glad you asked this question. I was hoping you would, and I workshop an answer with my wife last night because I was hoping you were going to
Look
get
at
there.
you,
Because I was
all
trying to
prepared.
find like, what's the analogy that I can make? And the thing that I kept coming back to was music. So I don't know if anybody on this call has played music. I dabbled in piano when I was a kid. And you sit there and you watch somebody playing the piano, an expert, right? And they're doing all the things. They're making the runs. They're doing the left hand playing with the right hand, all of those different things. It looks so complicated and sounds so good. All they're really doing is variations on the same scales that you do when you're just learning how to do it. That's the foundational pyramid upon which everything that they're doing always relates back to. And I feel the same way about bookkeeping and accounting. You have to have, I think it's imperative that you have that foundational knowledge of, I learned what debits and credits are in college. I've learned like what these T accounts are. I've learned how to do all these things. How do I make that translation to real world stuff? And, Hannah and I are both, we work as virtual CFOs. We work as the kind of the lead person on that. I guarantee you, we spend probably 15 to 25% of our time going back to basic bookkeeping. Mm-hmm. And that foundational knowledge of it is the most important thing, because without that, I mean, if your bookkeeping's not great, your CFOing is not going to be great either. You gotta have it right.
There, you can tell a difference. I think Joey and I have both been in engagements where we've either worked alongside or observed people in an accounting position who clearly just don't have a great foundation in just your basic accounting, and it will absolutely translate into a lot of other things throughout your career if you don't make sure that you have that really early on and make sure you're really confident in that.
And the key is reps too, Hannah. You mentioned like having that be the work. I mean, I love that idea of work study or internships, Chayton. We were talking about internships before. Like my internship when I was in college, I sat down and did tax returns with people as an intern. I didn't do all the tax return. I did parts of tax returns, and I had someone there kind of holding my hand through most of it. Shout out, as always, to you, Tommy Martin from St. Gordon Associates in Manhattan, Kansas. Without him, I wouldn't have been anything. But I had other friends who did internships where all they did was calculate DPAD, which was important at the time. That calculation has been completely taken out of the tax code, so that was worthless, doing all those types of things. So I love that idea of like hands-on experience, getting in there, sitting yourself down in the mess and having to figure that out. That's huge. That's way more beneficial than passing an exam or doing any of the certifications that you can have.
Mm-hmm.
I've always thought it was really interesting that we send young accountants and young CPAs off to audit cash or, do a little sliver of a giant tax return for a big company when these students don't even understand how the company got to that amount of cash or how that company, whatever part of the tax return they're working on, how that was even calculated. Because in school, it's like, at least for me, it felt like it was like a week or two of general ledger. And of course, you use journal entries in everything you do throughout accounting. But the general ledger is the DNA of all accounting. I mean, your chart of accounts for a certain client that's everything. Your chart of accounts is messed up and everything just goes haywire from there. So I really love the perspective of what that bookkeeping experience can do for students. And I am lucky enough to be in an internship right now where I get to be in dirty books and be trying to fix books that have been messy and get them up to par to where they need to be. And I'm trying to push as many students as I can, even if it's some rinky-dink bookkeeping job for a mom and pop shop around the corner. Even that little experience is going to make a difference.
And Joey and I are really big fans of making sure that you understand the why. So kind of like you said, like looking at cash and auditing cash, but not understanding how they even got there. Like, sure, you can throw somebody in that and you can kind of give them a checklist or walk them through step by step in terms of what you need them to do. But it is exponentially more valuable to understand the why behind whatever it is you're doing. And I mean, some people are really blessed that they work with a leader who takes the time and does that for them and walks them through that and will pour into them. But I would encourage any student in an internship, starting out in your career, whatever that is, to ask. Like, don't be afraid to ask. Like, have the confidence to go to whomever you're working with and say, like, can you dive into this a little bit more with me? Like, I kind of want to understand the context around this. I think that will also help you if you can develop that, just always being more curious than certain on anything throughout your time in school. That will help you so much as you progress throughout your career.
That's such sound advice. I love that. Um, so kind of shifting gears a little bit, Summit CFO or Summit Virtual CFO is so much different than every other firm that we see. Just a couple weeks ago, I got to interview my friend Caden Cook, who's relatively new to working at Summit.
Love that guy.
And
Shout out to you, Caden.
Absolutely. He's a rock
he's
star.
He is.
he's been a mentor of mine since so we started out at the same university together. So he was a couple years ahead of me. I met him at a Meet the Firms event when he was working for a local firm in Idaho. But I want to dig a little deeper into what Summit is, because I don't think a lot of students realize how much work there is outside of just tax and audit, and how many other opportunities there are other than just the Big Four. And granted, the Big Four is good for certain people. There's certain people that fits them, but I don't think we talk enough about the amount of options that there are for students. I mean, especially in school.
Yeah, I guess.
And I'm going to let Joey speak to some of this because he has experience from the perspective of like a traditional accounting firm versus Summit. For me, Summit is the first public accounting firm that I've ever worked for. I worked in industry up to this point. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is how I know it's not how it all is, but I'm probably very jaded by the fact that this is my first experience in a public accounting firm.
Yeah, and I want to make sure too, as we're going through obviously Summit was a company before. We've been purchased by Anders, and that transition's been going on for about 2 years now, and I've been really impressed with how well I've felt supported by Anders, which is obviously a more traditional brick and mortar type CPA firm than Summit was, but on the other hand, they've been very much like embracing the remote work atmosphere, the type of work we do, the advisory services that we do. That's been a really, really positive match, I think, for a lot of us. Are we perfect? No. Are we trying to be? For the most part, do we pride ourselves on being different, to your point? Absolutely. That is the number one thing we want to do as a CPA firm, is change the way that people think about accounting. And the way you said it too was perfect about how certain firms are for certain people. And I always felt in public accounting like I was a square peg in a round hole. I never really quite felt like I fit in completely. For the most part, yeah, I mean, I could do the job, but it didn't provide joy. I didn't get to do a lot of the type of work that I wanted to. It's one of those things, I think, when you get back to it, that comes to having the confidence as a student to say, I kind of know what I want. And if you don't know what that is, that's fine. That's what Hannah and I are here for, folks who are here a little bit later in their career, to help provide some perspective on these things. But what I love the most about what we're trying to do is, we lean into the remote nature of it, because what we never wanted was for us to be geographically limited from a talent perspective. The number one thing I love about what we do is we all throw our ideas in the middle. Best idea wins. We don't care who it comes from. We don't care where it comes from. Best idea wins. That's always the way we have to think about it. And so from that perspective, I mean, we'll use Caden as an example. I am 100% certain that Caden Caden's coming for my job, whether I like it or not. He is fantastic. He's got the right mentality. He's a wonderful person. He's got a great personality. He's super sharp. Like, the sky is the limit for him. He, you know, you mentioned Idaho. He does not live anywhere close geographically to where Anders is based out of St. Louis. What a disaster that would be for us if we just did not find people like him. You know, we're geographically all over the place. We've got folks as far east as Florida and as far west as Hawaii. Like, we literally span the country from that perspective. And that's part of our superpower, is folks can come from anywhere and join the firm and really start to provide value, because there's different perspectives that come from stuff. You know, Hannah, you know, comes from a very different part of the world than I do. And, you know, the issues, you know, things that we are dealing with here in New Mexico are different than things that they're dealing with in St. Louis, and different perspectives maybe lend me to work with client A better than someone from, you know, Idaho or someone from Minnesota, or someone would work with this client. So that's the thing I love the most about what we're doing, is we're giving ourselves the most opportunities we can to get the best and the brightest, and then just get out of their way and let them do what they do.
I don't know if I bring too much of a different perspective, but I do bring a Southern attitude to an engagement. So I can at least own that for myself.
A great accent, you know what I'm saying? But
yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I mean, I interviewed Caden, so I'm just going to say, like, you know, yeah. I'm going to take ownership in that. But he truly is a rock star, and I echo everything that Joey said. And I just think that the day and age, and here's the thing, remote work is also not for everybody. Like, I understand that. Yeah, like, there's a lot of younger professionals, like, within our firm too, who really, really thrive on having the hybrid option of being home a couple of days, but really wanting that connection and getting engaged in different organizations, like within the firm, and activities and things like that. Like, and there's a place for that within our firm now that we have, especially now that we've merged with Anders. So I really love that we can truly cover like all the bases for whatever it is that, you know, your need is, like, to fill your cup. We potentially have a resource for that, and an option for you here, which is a really cool thing.
Well, and something I hadn't thought about before that I realized when Joey was talking was, I knew before that you could go out and get any talent you wanted because you're remote. You can go anywhere, right? But the fact that you're able to assign the best people possible to each engagement, and you're not tied geographically to who fits the best client, that's like a double whammy right there. You're getting the talent that you need in a time where almost all accounting firms are struggling to get talent. And at the same time, you're able to pair the associates and the CFOs and the talent perfectly to the client that best fits their specialties.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you know, obviously I'll brag on Hannah for a second here, because she's, you know, done a lot and had a lot of growth in her career. But one of the things she identified very early was that she wanted to work with nonprofit organizations and faith-based organizations, because those are the types of people she wants to work with. Anytime we have a client come through and say, hey, do you have anybody who handles, like, you know, churches or nonprofit groups or things like that, or serves nonprofit clients? We're like, oh yeah, we got a person. Here you go, Hannah, have fun. And that's a very, you know, we've got niches for trucking. We've got niches for digital agencies, obviously. We've got niches for legal. We've got niches for cannabis, which is something that is, you know, going to become a much larger niche, you know, just as rules change across the country. You know, and we're always trying to identify what that next vertical is. So if someone comes to us and says, hey, I want to do some CFOing and I want to work exclusively with architecture firms, that's where my passion is, that's where my fit is. I mean, I guarantee you we would sit there and say, okay, show us how that's going to work. And if the best idea wins and that idea works, we're going to get out of that person's way and let them go do their thing. And the other thing it allows too, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, Hannah and I have met in real life 3 times, but because of the infrastructure that we've put in place, we've had a lot of opportunities for direct training, direct mentorship, direct working together. And, as somebody whose job in the organization is to train and organize and help people, achieve what they're wanting to do, that's very empowering to me to say that, hey, I've got an organization that if Hannah says, I want to work on this, I can go advocate for her with leadership, and it's heard and acted upon in most cases.
And the same is true even for like senior accountants too. Like I think one thing, so whenever I came into Summit, I started off as a senior accountant in my role. And again, like I'd been in industry prior to coming to Summit. So I had like not just one industry experience, I had multiple, but because of the different types of clients that we serve, like I got exposure to like multiple types of industries. So like I was able to see pretty early on, like really where I wanted to put my focus and like what I loved, what I didn't love. I have somebody who I coach who I had that conversation with her this week of like, just want to understand like what she's really enjoying in terms of the actual clients that she works with. If she's finding true joy and fulfillment in any of those. And she didn't necessarily single out one, but she did single out one that she absolutely did not love. So I can be an advocate for her to go to leadership and say, do not staff her on this type of client. Please consider somebody else for that. And our leadership listens. And that is a really cool thing because we have just this really diverse group of people within our suite of staff that we can put on clients, and it tends to work out very well.
I love that. It's establishing such a different culture in accounting than it was before. And I think some of the bigger firms are starting to catch kind of the vision of what the accounting industry needs to be if it's going to keep going like it needs to. So kind of molding with that, you both co-host the Young CPA Success Show. What's the goal of that podcast, and what are your personal goals that have also tied in with that podcast? What kind of an impact are you guys trying to have?
Well, obviously, I think the number one thing and the reason behind why we started it was, we see the numbers just like students do. We see the numbers of what they're projecting the gap is from an accounting perspective. I think the gap at one point was 140,000 jobs that were short, and the industry's growing, and the demographics of our ownership of CPA firms across the country is trending older. So there's opportunity there. And when Hannah and I looked around the room, we were like, hey, there's a lot of work that's going to need to get done, and we can't do it all ourselves. So we've got to get people seeing that we're doing something differently. So the ultimate goal of the show is to highlight the way we think about things and highlight the way we see the world, but also try to get across the point that, Chayton, we want people like you and your friends to say, I want to work with Hannah and Joey. That's the ultimate goal of it. We want people to come want to work with us because we see the growth that we're trying to have. We see where we're wanting to push the company. And it's quite a bit different than what it is right now. And the only way we're going to do that is if we have this great group of people across the country who have identified that we want to work with these people at Anders. So that's the ultimate goal. The personal goal, I suppose, is I just like talking. So this is definitely one where it's like, this is one for me, right? Like I can talk about some fun things and do some things differently and kind of fill my cup in that way outside of just the debits and credits. I also think that's important for young people to learn is, sometimes you're going to have to do journal entries, and then sometimes you're going to get to sit here and hop on a cool podcast and talk about accounting for an hour. And both of those things can lead to a lot of fulfillment in your career.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this before the show, but for me too, like I really want to reshape the way that people think about accountants in multiple ways, not just in terms of the actual work that they do, but the biases around our industry as a whole. Like even when, I know for me going into accounting, whenever I thought of an accountant, I thought of a man in a suit and a tie,
Yeah.
really stiff tie, like, working on tax returns, pounding them out behind a desk. And that's just clearly not what's going on over here in this small little office in Tupelo, Mississippi. Like, and I am a female as well in this industry. So it is also my goal to be a voice for females in the industry, females who want to really be a rock star at their career and do whatever the heck that they want to do, while also having personal fulfillment, whether that's being a wife, whether that's being a mom, whether that's coaching some sport or playing intramurally, and like balancing that life for yourself. Because at the end of the day, like we need that fulfillment. And kind of like Joey said, like this is part of that fulfillment for me. Growing up, it wasn't ever like, especially when I was much younger, it wasn't ever what I wanted to be. It was who, and I wanted to be Katie Couric on the Today Show. So this is like me, like getting to live out this like really cool dream that like I never, like I thought it just wasn't going to happen. So like when Joey, we were in a meeting together, like I vividly remember it, and he was throwing out this idea of what he had for this show. And he's like, Hannah, if you'd want to do it, like maybe you should consider it. And I'm like, yeah, I do. You bet I do. Sign me up.
I must have done well because I was trying to inception you on that. We had kind of already done like Hannah's the person. I just needed to kind of
He did do well because this is
the
the first time I've ever heard him say that. We are learning this. I'm today years old when I learned that he had already had that thought.
I pull a lot of strings behind the scenes, Hannah, and I'm just kind of slowly getting you used to it. And I did want to point out too that your point about like letting everybody know that accounting is for everybody. I think that is also a central ethos to the show. Like one of the things I love about accounting is it doesn't matter whether you're a plumber, whether you're an electrician, whether you're an attorney, whether you're a nonprofit, every business and every potential type of business needs an accountant. So if everybody needs accountants, then accountancy as an industry needs to be for everyone. And that's a really important message for me too, is how do we make sure that we're creating an environment that allows people to be their authentic selves? And, to Hannah's point, I'm kind of doing the fraternity thing here where I've got the collared shirt on top, but I'm wearing athletic shorts. I've got the composite picture from the fraternity where we're business on top and relaxation on the bottom. And that's the thing I love about our team is that we really just don't take ourselves too seriously. Like, the first time I met Adam Hale, our COO, I'll just be honest, he scared me. I didn't join the firm for a year because he scared me so much in the interview because he's very intense. But then you meet him in person, he's sitting there, he's cracking jokes, he's making fun of people. The firm invests an awful lot in culture and in team, and we have awesome retreats. We're getting ready in a couple of weeks to go to spend a few days in Las Vegas as a team and do some of that. And shenanigans will ensue. Good food will be consumed. A lot of fun learning will do, but also a lot of fun, like just hanging out will happen too. And that's important.
That's so awesome. And we need more of these voices. I mean, that's the whole reason I started posting consistently on LinkedIn and why I started this podcast is because I think there's an enormous opportunity for young people who decide to do accounting. There's incredible versatility in what you can do in your career with accounting as well. I mean, you don't have to go file tax returns every day. You don't have to, be someone who's in the back office behind a desk. With what Summit's doing every day, I mean, you're interacting and helping people every single day.
Yep.
And I don't think students, when they're sitting in their intermediate financial accounting 2 class, learning about diluted earnings per share, are able to see that vision that eventually that career could lead them to helping people and having a positive impact on the world. Because for me, I think that's what drives me to accounting is the fact that someday I'll be able to help someone's business grow or be able to help them stay accurate with their taxes or help them keep guidelines that'll help their business keep growing and keep on going. So we need more of that. Do you have any advice for how students can kind of catch that vision while they're bookworms and they got their heads stuck in the books?
I think I have two pieces of advice. But Hannah, if you've got something, you go first because I've talked
Go
a
ahead.
lot.
Go ahead.
Okay. Number one, the best resource you have as a student is your teachers. I still talk to my teachers from K-State. It's been 15 years. I got to send an episode of the show to a very influential professor of mine and to say, hey, look what you started 20 years ago. That was a lot of fun. That was very cool. But don't be afraid to go talk to your teachers, because the thing that I've learned in my career is that experience in all cases has to be earned. There's no shortcuts for experience. And sometimes, I've had a lot of successes in my career, but man, I've had some ones where I've just had my butt handed to me. But that perspective can be learned and appreciated and passed down from person to person. So having personal relationships with your professors. In fact, one of my professors got me my first job. It was Fred Smith at K-State. He got me my first internship because he worked at the firm in Manhattan where, that was doing the interviewing, and that was the in that I needed. So talk to your professors. The other thing too is, I'll be the first to admit I am horrible at social media. I'm not great at LinkedIn. I'm working on getting better at it. But, asking those questions, when we talk about coaching versus mentorship, coaching is a coach down relationship. My job as Hannah's coach is to push that down. If Hannah's wanting to look at me as a mentor, she needs to mentor up. So if you're an accounting student and you want to learn, go talk to people, go send messages to folks. And here's the thing. People love talking about themselves. That's the number one advice. Someone's like, I don't know how to talk to people. Just ask them questions about themselves. They love it.
Yes.
And so be aware a little bit of timing. Don't reach out to a tax professional on April, what is today, the 4th, and be like, hey, can I talk to you in the next 24 hours about this? It's probably not going to get a response. But if you wait until, the summertime and you ask your local accounting firm, hey, I'd love to talk to someone about this, who's available? Those types of conversations will go a long way towards helping you figure out what it is you want to do and maybe what it is you don't want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was absolutely going to go down the mentorship path as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't even have to be people who's, like you said, that's local to you. Be bold. Reach out to somebody on LinkedIn that you just really love their vibe. You love what they're doing and you look up to them or whatever that is. Just shoot them a message. Worst thing they could do is not respond. It's not the end of the world if that happens at all. And then there's also, because we live in such a digital age, there's podcasts like this too, that you can listen to, that you can find people who are maybe a little bit ahead of you. So that way you can wrap your arms around how they got there, what they experienced along the way, different things that happened, and be able to hear those stories and potentially relate to those. And really, I think that those are some really foundational things that you can use to be able to visualize what your career could potentially look like for yourself. Because diluted earnings per share, let me just tell you, Chayton, I am sitting for the CPA exam this year. Like I said, untraditional path to getting here, and I took FAR a few weeks ago, so I'm my eyes started twitching whenever you said that, because I'm just I'm just so over it. If you knew the amount of times throughout my career that I've ever done that, it is zero. It is absolutely zero.
One time.
For the exam? Is that what it was?
No, in real life, IRL, one time. I had a company that I worked for that was going through evaluation. I had to dilute earnings per share.
Oh, well, one.
Yeah, one time.
Yeah, it's crazy, but yeah, so it's hard whenever you're in that grind, whenever you're just trying to get through it to even see what it could potentially be and why it's worth it. So I think those are all really great things.
Yeah, and to close the loop on my scales thing from earlier with the music, right? When you're doing the scales, sometimes you can't see and you don't have the perspective of what that's going to turn into. So it's helpful sometimes to have somebody who's been doing it for a long time say, oh yeah, here's how what you're doing is the basis. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'll be sitting there like in a consulting meeting and I will go back to be like, all right, well, what are the debits and credits on this thing? Like, what's the actual root of what we're trying to solve? And you get back down to that foundational level and you're like, man, I'm so happy that I did kind of do that grinding away a little bit in school, especially about like understanding the fundamentals of what we're doing. Cause you go back to it all the time, even when you're doing, you know, rather complicated consulting for, you know, large, you know, multinational companies, like some of the kinds we work with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard. I don't think I'd be able to survive accounting if all I saw was the classroom. You know,
Yeah.
I listen to I probably have like 50 accounting podcasts I listen to. Like over the past 3 or 4 years, I'm seeing there's been a complete explosion of podcasting in the accounting industry. And I don't know if Summit started that, because Summit's definitely got a head start on people with the podcast networks that they have. But yeah, like, I mean, I just got done pulling an all-nighter because I have a financial accounting exam here in like 2 hours, and that sucks. You know, studying for accounting is hard. It's a much harder degree than marketing or business management, but it's worth it. And if you're not talking to people who are actually doing it, I think it's hard to see that as a student. So
Yeah.
I love that advice. Maybe just one last question for you guys. Actually, two, sorry. One, so I was listening to one of the first episodes of the Modern CPA Success Show. I think that was the first podcast that Summit started.
Sounds right.
This was like 3 or 4 years ago, I think, but Summit had like 10,000 applicants to their firm that year. For students who want to get to a firm like Summit, what's your best advice for how they can differentiate themselves and be prepared for a role such as a virtual CFO? Would it be best to have multiple years of public accounting experience? Would it be best to have industry experience? Do you guys hire students right out of school and who are preparing to take the CPA exams? Or, you know, what advice do you have for that? Because as firms like Summit get their voices out and are seen more, it's obviously going to be more and more competitive to get to a firm like that.
I don't know, obviously in the early years of Summit as a firm, what their hiring strategy was in terms of what they looked at for people coming right out of college. I know in terms of in my experience, since I have been here, because I was here few months pre-merger for Anders, I know that there weren't a ton of training set up to like bring somebody straight out of college into like jumping in real quick into helping on clients. The beauty of the fact that we have merged with Anders is that there is a very clear path for somebody who wants to come into the firm right out of college, get their boots on the ground. We have internship programs to staff accountant to senior accountant. Like, there is a very clear path within the firm and very structured training opportunities to bring somebody up to speed. In terms of like experience in that, you know, that's hard. I think that it can go both ways. If you have public accounting experience, great. Be sure that you're outlining what industries you worked with. I think technology is another really big piece of what we look at as well. So being able to be proficient in multiple platforms, making sure that you're at least aware of what's on the market and able to stay kind of ahead of that. Because one thing is for sure is we are not afraid to try a new platform and implement a new platform around here. Like, we will do it in a heartbeat, and making sure that you're on the cusp of that, I think, would help a lot. Now, I obviously came from industry, so like I'm a little bit biased in terms of the fact of what that experience can bring, because I think that that is equally as valuable as having public accounting experience in a lot of ways. So I think it's a lot of different things, but ultimately I would say, like, be yourself too, like in it. Make sure you're representing your whole self well. Maybe that even means like adding things to your resume of things you like to do outside of work, and like representing yourself as a whole person, because I think that's one thing that we do care about more so than other places that I've seen, is we really try to take a whole person perspective on people here and recognize that people were more than just accountants here. Like we want that for people, and we want to live that out.
Hannah, I'm going to drop a couple truth bombs here.
Ooh, okay.
To kind of round this out. So
brace yourselves.
Here's the best way I can answer that question is, I'm going to use a great example. I love the Disney Channel movie Ratatouille because a great chef can come from anywhere. And that's the same way I think about a great virtual CFO. We've got virtual CFOs who've only done industry. We've got virtual CFOs who did public accounting. We've got folks who, came in as tech people and we taught them how to become accountants. A great hire for us can come from anywhere, but like Ratatouille, not anyone can be a great fit. So in terms of skill, here's the dirty secret they don't tell you in college. From my perspective, what you know is not as important as being willing to learn and being coachable. I remember thinking that when I was in college, and I almost gave myself like massive illnesses trying to get this, but I was like, I have to get out of college with a 4.0 GPA. I have to prove to everybody that I have this fundamental knowledge. And I was able to achieve that, but that did not translate to anything other than getting that first opportunity with the place that I was at before, St. Gordon Associates in Manhattan, Kansas. And that might not have even played that much into it. It might have been personality or might have been something else. I don't really know. But from my perspective, an applicant who comes in, like if I have to choose between two applicants, one who's maybe got better experience, but the other one maybe here who doesn't have quite the same experience, but is like super coachable, super ready to go, a great communicator. Communication skills are so important in what we do because you have to be able to translate complex financial information and use it to tell the story of the business and figure out how you're going to get that across to somebody who probably does not speak financial accounting the way that we do. That is a learned skill. But if you come into an interview and you're polished and you're a great communicator and you've got some good relevant experience, but you're really coachable and we can get you into the system, that's a very compelling candidate to me, more so than someone who's got the perfect mix of like, wow, well, I was in industry for 2 years and then I did 3 years of public accounting and I did this, and this. Cool, great. That's very good. But is that going to fit what we need you to do tomorrow? Sometimes, but not necessarily. So a lot of those soft skills, those communication skills, the storytelling, our friend Jeff Barch at Project Greenlight, all of his podcasts about how to become an effective storyteller, I'll tell you what, if you can master that early in your career and you can effectively communicate with your superiors and with your clients about what you're seeing and what that means to them, man, the sky is the limit for you in what the future of accounting is going to be, which is certainly more advisory and less transactional. So that's my biggest advice, to get into a firm like Summit. And I did want to say there was another thing too. It really helps having a relationship with somebody. So like, again, if you send me, and again, I'm terrible at LinkedIn, but if you send me something on LinkedIn and you're not trying to sell yourself, you're just trying to be like, hey, I just want to talk about accounting and I get to know who you are as a person. And then down the road you apply, like that's a lot easier to wade through the muck because we know who you are. Like, interact with us, reach out with us, have a bit of a proactive nature to that. That's going to go a long way too, to standing out from the 10,000 resumes that come in. It's funny. I was one of those 10,000 at Summit, by the way. I don't know if I told you this, Hannah. Like I applied first, did not get any response back. And then a friend of my brother's that he went to college with started working there. And I reached out to him and he got me the interview with Jamie and Adam and Zach. So I get it. It's a challenge when there's that much volume, for sure.
Such sound advice. And Jeff is the GOAT. I'm going to have him. He's coming on the podcast here in a couple of weeks, so I'm super excited to chat with him and have him share some of his gems with the students. Thank you both so much for your time. I know you guys are busy, and it's just been so great for you to share this value with me, and I'll get to share it with my listeners through the podcast. I will share the link to Summit and also the Young CPA Success Show below, and hopefully I'll be able to drop the link to our episode on the Young CPA Success Show. So super excited for that for next week.
We can't wait to have you. Like, this is clearly great. I'm so glad we were able to have this conversation before, because now Joey and I get to concoct what we get to talk about next week.
We have to flip the script a little bit. This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having us. This has been a pleasure, and to all your audience out there, keep it up. It's easy, especially now because we're getting to final season. So just keep going.
And Joey may not be good at LinkedIn, but I tend to look at
Hannah
LinkedIn
is.
a few days a week. So, you may not get an answer from Joey, but if you connect with me on LinkedIn and reach out, then I'll respond to you. So, yes, please don't hesitate if you're listening to this to reach out to me and Joey on LinkedIn or via email. However, we would love to connect with you.
Yep. I can testify Hannah answers her LinkedIn messages. So.
See? Yep, it's true.
Well, thank you so much. And I really hope everyone enjoys this episode. So thank you.